The day my life changed forever started like every other Saturday I'd had in the last 3 years. Alarm at 6, coffee, gym clothes, out the door by 6:15. I wasn't thinking about my mother. I wasn't thinking about my sister. I wasn't thinking about the $40,000 I had spent 2.5 years bleeding myself dry to save. Every overtime shift, every skipped vacation, every lunch eaten at my desk instead of going somewhere nice, because in 4 months, I was finally going to make an offer on my house. I was thinking about whether I had enough coffee in the apartment to get me through leg day. That's it. That's all I was thinking about. I got back from the gym at 8, showered, made breakfast, sat down at my kitchen table with my laptop to do what I do every Saturday morning: check my accounts, move some numbers around, feel good about how close I was getting to the goal. I opened my savings account. The page loaded, and I froze. $942.17. I sat there and I stared at that number and I could not make it make sense. Because 3 weeks ago, I had looked at that same account and seen $40,847. I remember the exact number. I remember it because I had taken a screenshot. I'd been taking screenshots every few weeks just to watch the progress. The way some people track weight loss or steps, I was proud of that number. I had earned every single dollar of it. $942.17. I refreshed the page. I genuinely thought it was a display error, a glitch, some banking system hiccup that would correct itself in 10 seconds if I just hit refresh. $942.17. I put my coffee down. I clicked into the full transaction history, and there they were. 4 transfers, 4 separate outgoing transfers over the last 6 weeks to an account number I had never seen before in my life. $12,000 on a Tuesday in September, $11,000 the following week, $9,000 after that, $8,000 3 weeks later. $40,000 moved, gone, while I was at work, while I was sleeping, while I was sitting across from my mother at her kitchen table, drinking sweet tea and talking about nothing. My hands started shaking. I want you to understand what $40,000 meant to me specifically, because it wasn't just a number. I grew up watching my parents rent their whole lives. I watched my dad come home exhausted from a second job he worked for 6 years just so we could have a little cushion, a little breathing room, a little something. I promised myself when I was 19 years old that I was going to own something, that some piece of this world was going to have my name on it and nobody would be able to take it from me. That account was the promise I had made to 19-year-old me, and it was sitting at $942.17. I opened the login history on my account. I'd turned on that feature when I first set up the account and then completely forgotten about it. And there they were, login sessions, 6 of them over the last 2 months, not from my phone, not from my laptop, from a device I had never used and an IP address I didn't recognize. I ran the IP through a basic lookup. Took about 30 seconds. The location came back as a neighborhood in Concord, North Carolina, where my mother lives. And right then, right in that exact moment, my brain connected a dot I didn't know was there. About 8 months ago, after my dad passed, I had sat down with my mother at her kitchen table and walked her through online banking. She'd been overwhelmed, couldn't manage the accounts alone, needed to see how it worked, and I had logged into my own accounts to show her how the interface worked. I thought I was just helping her. I thought I was being a good daughter. I didn't know she was memorizing what I typed. I sat in my kitchen for probably 2 full minutes without moving. And then I called her. She picked up on the second ring, which is the detail that gets me every single time I tell this story. She didn't let it ring 5 times like someone who is nervous. She didn't let it go to voicemail like someone who is guilty. She picked up on the second ring like she had been waiting, like she had been sitting by that phone knowing this call was coming and deciding exactly what she was going to say. I said, not a question, a statement. Mom,
"What did you do?" She said, "Rachel, I was going to talk to you about this." And the thing about how easily that came out, how calm and prepared she sounded, like she had rehearsed for exactly this conversation, made me feel like the ground itself had shifted under my feet. I said, "You took $40,000 out of my savings account?" She said, "Brianna needed the money for the venue deposit. We were short and the booking was going to be canceled, and there wasn't time to have a big conversation about it. I knew you had the money. I knew that if you just really stopped and thought about it, you would want to help your sister. You would. You just would have needed too much convincing, and there wasn't time for that." I said, "You needed my permission. You needed to ask me." She said, and I want you to hear this. I want every word to land. "You would have said no." I said, "Because it is my money." And then she said the sentence that changed everything, the sentence that I have turned over in my mind every single day since. "Rachel, you're single. You don't have a family to take care of. Brianna is building a life. You can save again. It's just money." Just money. I hung up the phone. I sat in the silence of my apartment and I didn't move. And something happened in me in those minutes that I have tried to describe to people and never quite gotten right. It wasn't rage. I expected rage, and rage didn't come. It wasn't tears. I expected to cry, and I couldn't. What happened was this absolute bone-deep stillness. Like every feeling I'd ever had just stepped back and got very quiet and made room for the one thing that was left: clarity. I opened my laptop. I pulled up the number from my bank's 24-hour fraud line. I looked up the direct contact for Patricia Nguyen, a civil attorney I had met at a dinner party 3 years ago, a woman I had thankfully kept in my phone. I opened a new document and started typing a timeline. The wedding was in 3 days. The deposit my mother had stolen my money to pay, $40,000 sitting in the account of a $12,000 a night venue on the outskirts of Charlotte, was refundable under very specific legal circumstances. And I was about to find out if those circumstances applied. I was not going to lose my house. I was not going to let my mother decide what my life was worth, and I was not going to let $40,000 disappear into a one-day party for someone else's fairy tale while I started over from zero. Not without a fight. Not without a paper trail. Not without making every single phone call I needed to make. And if that meant that on Saturday morning, when 400 dressed-up guests pulled into that venue parking lot, the doors were locked, and 2 police officers were waiting, then that is exactly what it meant. My name is Rachel Calloway. I'm 34 years old, I live in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I work for a logistics and supply chain company where I have spent the last 8 years of my career. I own my car, I pay my own bills, I've been fully independent since I was 22. I grew up in a middle-class family. My parents, David and Linda Calloway, were good people. Mostly. We weren't rich, but we were stable. We had family dinners. We went to church on Sundays. My dad coached my younger brother Marcus's Little League team. My mom baked birthday cakes from scratch. Normal family. Loving family. Or so I thought. I also have a younger sister, Brianna, 29 years old. And if you grew up as the older sibling to someone who could do no wrong in your parents' eyes, you're going to understand a lot of what I'm about to tell you. Brianna is not the villain of the story. I want to be honest about that right now. She's spoiled, she's used to getting what she wants, but she did not steal from me. My mother did. Those are 2 very different things, and I think it matters that I say that clearly from the start. Now, before I go any further, I need to explain how any of this was even possible. Because the first thing people ask when they hear this story is, how did your mother get access to your savings account? And the honest answer is the one that still keeps me up at night. I trusted her. Real quick before we go any further, if you are new here, subscribe right now. I share real stories every single week about money, family, betrayal, and the moments that change people forever. If this story is already getting under your skin, you are exactly in the right place. Hit subscribe, hit the bell, it costs you nothing. Okay, back to it.
My dad passed away 2 years before any of this happened. January 14th, a Tuesday. He was 63 years old, and he went to the gym in the morning like he had every Tuesday for 20 years. Came home, complained of chest pain, sat down on the couch, and that was it. Massive heart attack, gone before the ambulance arrived. Losing my dad wrecked our family. It wrecked my mom especially. They'd been married 37 years. She didn't know how to exist in that house without him. She stopped cooking, she forgot to pay the electric bill. She called me 3 times a day about things she used to handle herself without thinking. So I stepped up. Of course I did. I'm Rachel. That's what I do. I went over on weekends, I helped her sort through the mail, I set up auto pay for her utilities. I showed her how to use online banking, sitting right next to her at the kitchen table, walking her through the screens, showing her exactly what to click. I even let her watch me log into my own accounts once to demonstrate how the whole process worked. I thought I was just being a good daughter. I didn't realize she was memorizing my login credentials. Here's the part that makes me want to crawl out of my own skin when I think about it. At some point, I still don't know exactly when, my mother sat down at her own computer, typed in my username and password from memory, and gained access to my savings account. She watched it, quietly, for months, like she was waiting for the right moment. And when Brianna's wedding budget started spiraling, my mother decided my savings account was the solution. Let me tell you about Brianna's wedding, because you need the full picture. Brianna got engaged to a man named Derek Hollingsworth about 2.5 years ago. Derek comes from money. His father owns a chain of auto dealerships across the Carolinas, and Derek had grown up with a very specific picture of what his life was supposed to look like. And Brianna, who had spent her whole childhood watching her parents clip coupons and stretch every dollar, had spent her entire adult life dreaming about one day that would be completely different, one day where nothing was off the table.
Her wedding was going to be that day. The original budget was $45,000. Within 4 months of the engagement, it was $70,000. By the time they signed contracts with vendors, it was pushing $115,000. $115,000 for one day. Derek's family put in $35,000. My mom had $20,000 saved specifically for Brianna's wedding, money she and my dad had quietly set aside over the years. That's $55,000, still $60,000 short. And at some point, in conversations I was never included in, my mother looked at her 2 daughters and decided which one's dreams mattered more. What she saw when she looked at me? 34 years old, no husband, no kids, steady job, healthy savings account sitting untouched. What she saw when she looked at Brianna, about to get married, needs money, this is her moment. What she decided, Rachel won't mind. Except she knew I would mind. That's why she never asked. That's the part I keep coming back to. She didn't ask. She helped herself. She used login credentials she had no business having, and she moved my money, 4 separate times over 6 weeks to a shared account she had set up for wedding expenses. $12,000, then $11,000, then $9,000, then $8,000. $40,000 while I was at work, while I was living my life, while I was talking to her on Sunday afternoons on the phone about nothing in particular. And I need to tell you the worst part of that. While she was draining my account, while those transfers were happening, she called me one Sunday and asked if I wanted her pot roast recipe. The pot roast recipe? She told me she was proud of me. She said, "You've worked so hard, sweetheart." I had no idea. Wednesday, October 9th, 3 days before the wedding. I'm at my apartment. It's about 8:30 at night. I have a glass of wine. I'm paying bills. Completely ordinary evening. And I'm moving money from savings to checking to cover my car insurance. I pull up my savings account. The page loads. $942.17. I stare at it. I refresh the page. $942.17. My first thought, and I am not exaggerating, is that I'm reading it wrong.
Your brain genuinely does not accept something that impossible on the first pass. I think I'm misreading the number. I think the comma is in the wrong place. I think there's some kind of display error. I click into the full balance. $942.17. And then I click into the transaction history and I see them. 4 transfers. 4 separate outgoing transfers to an account I don't recognize. Over 6 weeks. $12,000, $11,000, $9,000, $8,000. I feel the wine glass slip in my hand. I set it down very carefully on the coffee table. I sit there for what feels like a long time, but is probably 45 seconds. Then I open the login activity on my account. I had that feature enabled. The bank recommended it when I first set it up, and I'd turned it on and forgotten about it. There they are. Login sessions. Not from my phone, not from my computer, from an IP address I don't use, from a device I don't own. I run the IP through a basic lookup. The location comes back as a neighborhood in Concord, North Carolina, where my mother lives. I call her. She picks up on the second ring, and I say, and I'm not asking, I'm stating, "Mom, what did you do?" She says, "Rachel, I was going to talk to you about this." And something about how easily that comes out, how prepared she sounds, like she had rehearsed for exactly this phone call, makes me feel like the floor drops out from under me. I say, "You took $40,000. She says, "Brianna needed it. The venue was going to cancel the booking. We were short and there was no time, and I knew you had the money, and I knew that if you really thought about it, you would want to help your sister. You just would have needed too much convincing, and there wasn't time." I say, "You needed to ask me." She says, "You would have said no." And my voice does this thing. It goes very quiet and very flat, which is what happens when I am completely beyond tears and into something else. And I say, "Because it is my money." And she says it. She actually says it. "You're single, Rachel. You don't have a family to take care of. Brianna is building a life. You can save again. It's just money." Just money. 2 years and 7 months of overtime shifts, of saying no to trips with friends because I had a goal, of eating lunch at my desk every single day instead of going out, of wearing the same winter coat for 3 years because I needed every extra dollar in that account, of putting off things I wanted, things I needed, things I deserved because I was working towards something real and specific. I was going to buy a house. Just money. I hang up the phone. I sit in the silence of my apartment and I don't move for a while. And then, I don't cry. I know it probably sounds like I should. And eventually I will, but not yet. Right now what I feel is this cold, focused clarity, like everything has sharpened into a single point. I open my laptop. I start making a list. The first call I make is to my bank. It's after 9 p.m., but they have a 24-hour fraud line. I explain everything: unauthorized account access, transactions I did not authorize. Here is the login IP, here are the transfer amounts, here are the dates. The representative is calm and thorough. She opens an investigation, flags the account, and tells me that because my own login credentials were used rather than a third-party breach, the situation falls into what the bank calls an authorized access issue, which complicates the fraud claim but doesn't eliminate it. She tells me I'll need to file a police report. I say, "I know, that's next." The second call is to Patricia N. Wen. Patricia is a civil attorney I met through a colleague about 3 years ago. We ended up at a dinner party, spent 2 hours talking about contract law, and traded numbers. I have her personal cell. I call it at 9:45 in the evening. She picks up. I can hear a TV in the background. I say, "Patricia,
My mother used my saved login credentials to steal $40,000 from my savings account over the last 6 weeks to pay for my sister's wedding. The wedding is in 3 days. What do I do? Long pause. She says, "Don't do anything tonight. Come to my office tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. and bring every transaction record you have." I say, "And the venue?" She says, "Do not call the venue yet." I wait until morning. Patricia's office, Thursday, 8 a.m. I've printed everything: the transaction history, the login records, screenshots, the IP lookup results, and a timeline I built myself because when things need to be understood, I build timelines. Patricia goes through all of it in silence for about 12 minutes. I sit across from her and drink the worst coffee I have ever tasted in my life and don't say a word. Finally, she looks up. She says, "This is not complicated legally. What your mother did is theft by deception under North Carolina law. The fact that she is your mother is irrelevant. The fact that she observed your login credentials doesn't make her use of them authorized. You did not give permission. She knew you didn't give permission. She chose to act without it." I say, "Can I get the money back?" She says, "That depends on where it went and how fast we move. The venue has most of it, which means we need to go after the venue." Here is what Patricia explains to me. The venue, Ashwood Grand Estate, a luxury event property outside Charlotte, accepted a $40,000 deposit wired from a joint account my mother had set up. That $40,000 is traceable, directly and documentably, to my savings account, stolen without authorization. Under North Carolina law, there is a civil claim called unjust enrichment. If a party receives money that originated from stolen funds and cannot demonstrate fair value was exchanged for those specific funds, they can be required to return them. It's not guaranteed, but it's a pressure point. More importantly, Patricia tells me, if we send the venue a formal legal notice today, before the wedding, informing them the deposit came from fraudulently obtained money and that we are prepared to litigate, the venue faces a choice: proceed and be named in a lawsuit, or put a hold on the event. Most venues, she says, are not going to want that exposure. I say, "Send the notice." She says, "Are you sure? This stops the wedding, Rachel." I say, "Patricia, my mother stole my house money to pay for a party. Send the notice." Patricia drafts the cease and desist that afternoon. It lays out the full situation: unauthorized account access, fraudulent transfer, traceable funds. It notifies the venue that the deposit paid to them was made using criminally obtained money and that proceeding with the event could expose them to serious civil liability. She sends it certified mail, emails it directly to the venue's general manager and their legal contact, and carbon copies the fraud division at the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department, where I had filed my report that same morning. And then I call Brianna. I go back and forth on this, because Brianna is still my sister, and there is a part of me, even after everything, that doesn't want to be the person who destroys her day without at least giving her one last chance to fix it. She picks up on the third ring, voice bright and excited. She has absolutely no idea. I say, "Brianna, I need you to tell me right now, did you know that Mom used my savings account to pay your venue deposit?" Dead silence. Then she says, "Mom told me she talked to you. She said you agreed." I say, "She lied to you. I had no idea until last night. $40,000, Brianna. 4 transfers, 6 weeks. More silence. And then, this is the moment I have replayed in my head more times than I can count. She says, "Rachel, the wedding is Saturday.
Can we please just deal with this after? I close my eyes. I say, "No, Brianna, we can't." She says, "Rachel, please. People are flying in. Grandma is coming from Tampa. Derek's whole family." I say, "I need my money back. All of it. Before Saturday." She says, "That's not possible." I say, "Then I am going to get it back another way. And I am so sorry, but your mother stole from me, and I cannot pretend she didn't." I hang up. I go home. I make dinner. I try to watch TV. I can't.
Friday, the day before the wedding. The texts start at 7 a.m. "Rachel, please call me. I love you. I know I made a mistake. I'm so sorry. Please don't do this to your sister. Your father would want this family to stay together. Why are you doing this? I thought I raised you better." That last one, I want you to sit with that for a second, because I had to. The person who stole from me telling me she raised me better than the person holding her accountable. I screenshot every message and forward them to Patricia. My Aunt Donna, my dad's sister, calls at 9 a.m. I pick up because Donna is one of the few people in my family whose opinion I actually respect. She says, "Rachel, honey, I heard what happened, and I want you to know what your mother did was wrong. It was wrong." I say, "Thank you, Aunt Donna." She says, "But I'm going to ask you something from a place of love. Is there anything, any arrangement at all, that would let the wedding go forward while this gets sorted out?" I say, "She needs to return the $40,000 today." Donna is quiet. Then she says, "She doesn't have it, Rachel. I know. She spent everything on the wedding. It's all been paid out." I say, "Then there's nothing I can do." Donna says, "I know, sweetheart, I know." And she starts to cry. I hold it together until we hang up, then I sit on my bathroom floor for about 10 minutes. At 2 p.m., Patricia calls. She says, "I heard from the venue. Stephen Park, the general manager, called me directly. He consulted their legal team this morning. They are not proceeding. He said they cannot, in good conscience, host an event funded by money that is the subject of an active fraud investigation."
I say, "Okay." She says, "Rachel, the wedding is not going to happen." And I say, because this is what I actually feel and I want to be honest, I know, and it still has to happen this way. At 7 p.m., my mother shows up at my apartment door. I hear the knock. I look through the peephole. She's standing in the hallway in her coat, holding her purse in both hands. And she looks smaller than I have ever seen her. Not angry, scared. I don't open the door. She knocks again. She says my name. She says please. She says she's sorry. So sorry. She made a terrible mistake. She panicked. She thought she was helping. She thought she could fix it before I ever found out. She was going to pay me back. She swears she was. She says, "Rachel, I know I hurt you. I know what I did was wrong, but your sister is going to be devastated. Please, please open the door." I press my back against the wall beside the door. I can hear her crying in the hallway. I don't move. After about 20 minutes, her footsteps go quiet down the hall. I stand there alone in my apartment for a long time after she leaves. And I'm not going to pretend that was easy. Hearing your mother cry outside your door is not something you just shake off. It costs something real, some part of you that doesn't come back exactly the way it was. But I walk to my bedroom. I pick up the photo on my nightstand. It's me and my dad at my college graduation, and he is grinning so wide he looks like he might actually burst. And I think about what that $40,000 was supposed to become. I set the photo down. I go to sleep.
Saturday, October 12th. I wake up at 7. Shower, make coffee, sit at my kitchen table in my bathrobe, right back to where this whole story started. I am genuinely the calmest I have been all week. Patricia calls at 8:30. She tells me Stephen Park confirmed late the previous night that the venue has posted a closure notice for today's event. The doors will not open. The deposit funds have been placed in escrow pending the investigation. She also tells me that Detective Monica Reyes, the CMPD detective assigned to my fraud case, will have officers present at the property as a precaution. Standard protocol when there's a contested financial dispute at a large private event. I say, "Will Brianna be okay? Physically okay?" Patricia says, "There will be officers there. It'll be handled." I say, "Okay." I sit at my kitchen table and I finish my coffee. At 10 a.m., Cassandra, Brianna's maid of honor, texts me. She'd been the only person all week who reached out without yelling at me, and I had genuinely come to appreciate that about her. She says, "Rachel, no matter what happens today, I hear you. I hope this gets resolved, and I'm sorry your family did this to you." I stare at that message for a long time. Then I write back, "Thank you. Take care of her today." She says, "I will." The ceremony was scheduled for 2 p.m. Guests were invited starting at 1:30. The bridal party was due at the venue at 1 p.m. for final photos. At 1:15, Cassandra sends me a photo. I don't think she planned to. I think she was in shock and didn't know what else to do with what she was seeing. The photo shows the front entrance of Ashwood Grand Estate. The tall iron gates are open. They let people onto the property, but the main venue doors are closed. There's a printed notice posted on the glass. 2 uniformed officers stand to the right of the entrance, and spilling across the grand front drive are people in formal wear, bridesmaids in slate blue dresses, groomsmen in dark suits, guests in feels and suits standing in small, confused clusters, phones out, caterer's staff visible through a side window, frozen mid-setup. And in the center of the frame, I don't think Cassandra meant to frame it this way, is my mother. She is standing perfectly still in a champagne-colored mother-of-the-bride dress, holding her phone in both hands, staring at those closed doors. I look at that photo for a long time. I feel a lot of things. I am not going to list all of them. The one I feel most clearly is grief. Not triumph, not satisfaction. Grief for what this family was, for what I had wanted it to still be. The wedding did not happen that day. 400 guests were redirected. Derek's family made calls, vendors were stood down. The florist, who'd arrived at 9 a.m. to begin setup and been turned away, posted something vague on Instagram that caused a small ripple of local curiosity, but nothing that named anyone specifically. Brianna and Derek went back to his parents' house. My mother drove home alone, and I sat in my apartment and ordered Thai food and watched a documentary about penguins. Because when your entire life is in chaos... Okay, so what happened after? The civil case against my mother moved fairly quickly by legal standards, which means it still took several months. Detective Reyes filed criminal charges against my mother for financial exploitation based on the documented unauthorized account access. My mother hired a defense attorney. The civil case was separate. Patricia filed a claim for recovery of the full $40,000 plus damages. The venue released the escrowed funds to the court within 60 days of the cease and desist. They cooperated fully once they understood the extent of the documentation. They didn't want to be holding money tied to a criminal case any longer than necessary. They had acted in good faith, and they knew it, and they showed it. My mother could not repay the $40,000 out of pocket. She had spent everything.
What eventually happened, and I want to be careful about what details I share, partly for legal reasons and partly because these are still my family members, is that a civil settlement was reached, a structured repayment plan, a formal legal acknowledgement of wrongdoing, and agreement that I would not pursue the full scope of possible damages in exchange for consistent repayment and that acknowledgement on the record. I got my money back, not all at once, not without a fight, but I got it back. Penguins are the only thing that makes any sense.
Okay, so what happened after? The civil case against my mother moved fairly quickly by legal standards, which means it still took several months. Detective Reyes filed criminal charges against my mother for financial exploitation based on the documented unauthorized account access. My mother hired a defense attorney. The civil case was separate. Patricia filed a claim for recovery of the full $40,000 plus damages. The venue released the escrowed funds to the court within 60 days of the cease and desist. They cooperated fully once they understood the extent of the documentation. They didn't want to be holding money tied to a criminal case any longer than necessary. They had acted in good faith, and they knew it, and they showed it. My mother could not repay the $40,000 out of pocket. She had spent everything. What eventually happened, and I want to be careful about what details I share, partly for legal reasons and partly because these are still my family members, is that a civil settlement was reached, a structured repayment plan, a formal legal acknowledgement of wrongdoing, and an agreement that I would not pursue the full scope of possible damages as an exchange for consistent repayment and that acknowledgement on the record. I got my money back. Not all at once, not without a fight, but I got it back.
Brianna and Derek did get married, about 8 months later. A small ceremony, city hall, and a dinner at their favorite restaurant with 20 people. From what I understand, it was genuinely beautiful in its own quiet way. I was not invited. I didn't expect to be. Not then. My relationship with my mother is... I don't have a clean word for it. We are not fully estranged. We have spoken. We have had long, hard conversations that neither of us wanted to have. She has said she's sorry. I believe she is sorry, in the way people are sorry when they have finally felt the full weight of what they did, even if it took losing everything for a while to get there. I have not forgiven her. I don't know if I will. I don't believe forgiveness is owed on any timeline I didn't set myself. But what I have decided is that the grief of what she did does not get to live permanently in the center of my life. I bought my house 14 months after the settlement. A 3-bedroom Craftsman in a neighborhood I have loved since I was 25 years old. Big front porch, real hardwood floors, a kitchen with a window above the sink that looks out at a backyard where I plan to eventually have a garden. I signed the papers on a Tuesday afternoon in September, and I sat on the floor of the empty living room afterward. No furniture, no boxes yet, just me on those hardwood floors, and I cried. Not the cold, shaking kind of crying from the night I found my account empty. A completely different kind. The kind that happens when something that was taken from you is finally yours again. I have a photo of my dad on my mantle now, same one from my nightstand. Graduation day. Him grinning like he might burst. I think about him when I make my mortgage payments. I think he would have been proud.
Here is what I want to leave you with. 1. Check your accounts. Today. Right now after this. Pull up your savings, your checking, your investment accounts, anything with real money in it, and look at the transaction history. Look at recent login activity. Look at the device list. I know it feels paranoid. I know you're thinking, Rachel, I trust my family. So did I. So did I. 2. Access means access. If any person, family member, partner, close friend, has ever watched you log into a financial account, change your password. Today. Not because those people are all bad people,
but because it only takes one moment of desperation for someone who loves you to make a catastrophic decision. Protect yourself before the desperation arrives. 3. Your financial goals are not negotiable just because you haven't finished them yet. The fact that I hadn't bought the house yet did not make my $40,000 any less mine. Dreams in progress are real. Savings in progress belong to you. Don't let anyone, not a parent, not a sibling, not anyone, treat your unfinished goal as less important than someone else's celebration. And 4, the one I want to sit with for just a moment. I am not a cold person. I did not want my sister's wedding to be canceled. When I made those calls, when I sent that notice, when I filed that police report, I felt sick. I still feel complicated about it. That complexity does not go away just because you're right. But being right gave me something to hold on to. It meant that when I went to sleep on Friday night, I knew what I was doing was not cruelty. It was not revenge. It was quiet, legal, documented justice. And quiet justice, in my experience, is the only kind that actually holds. If you made it to the end of the story, thank you. Genuinely. This one wasn't easy to tell, and I know it wasn't easy to sit with. If this hit close to home, if you've had a family member cross a financial line with you, or if someone has ever dismissed your goals because you were single anyway, or didn't have kids, or could always save again, drop your story in the comments. I read them. I respond when I can. You are not alone in this. And if you are new here and this is the first story you watched, welcome. Subscribe. Hit the bell. Every week I bring you a real story, told completely with nothing cleaned up and nothing left out. Because the truth, even when it's ugly, even when it's complicated, is always worth telling. My name is Rachel Calloway. I bought my house, and I want the same for you. Take care of your money. Take care of yourselves. I'll see you next week.